Welcome to Embrace Your Inner Boldness, the podcast dedicated to empowering you to live confidently, embracing all parts of who you truly are. I'm Melissa Henning-Frank, and I'm the founder, success coach, and consultant of Becoming Bold LLC, and you can count on me to be your guide on this incredible journey of self-discovery and transformation. Let's get right to it. Hello, thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to talk about overcoming fear and embracing change. I'll say that again. Overcoming fear and embracing change. I'm curious, when you hear the words fear and change, what are the feelings that pop up for you when you hear those words? How does it impact you? Do you feel it in your body anywhere? When I've asked this question before during workshops, people sometimes would say, when I think of the word change, I think about stress, I think about anxiety, I think about worry. Something that I typically say when change is happening is, oh gosh, not again. Then there's other people who might say that change is exciting, that it brings opportunity, that it's energizing. They say, let's go. So how can it be that we have such different feelings and reactions about change? I like to say it comes down to what's packed up in our metaphorical backpack. So the backpack, which I'll refer to in all of my podcasts most likely, it's the crap that we carry around with us. And most of the time we don't even realize that we're carrying it around. So it's in our backpack. It's all of the stuff that we've experienced. It's our programming. And we carry it around unconsciously or subconsciously. But more about that later. Personally, for me, I typically embrace change. Change doesn't bother me like I've noticed it bothers a lot of people. I tend to be the kind of person that gets excited when a change is coming down the road. I look at it as potentially opportunities coming up. And I had to really dig into that because I do have a lot of stuff in my backpack that I've worked on over the years unpacking. And it makes sense to me that change would be something to look forward to because for me, growing up was pretty chaotic. And while that's a story for another episode, believe me when I say it was highly unpredictable. And like I said, I've had a lot of work to do to empty out my backpack. So given that, you'd think the concept of change to me would cause me stress, anxiety, worry, and that feeling of not again. But that's not at all how it is for me. And I think that for me, anytime there was a change in my routine growing up, it gave me something else to focus on, which technically lifted my perspective, lifted my mood. I guess it lifted my frequency, if you will. So for me, change shook things up enough that the status quo of uncertainty in my home was really put on the back burner for a bit. And I get that. I get still to this day the fact that I embrace change and get excited about change because it does shake up the status quo. But it's for different reasons, and it's not as deeply programmed now that I know what psychological safety and appropriate status quo looks like and feels like. So there's pros and cons to each unique way that people manage change. Accepting change too quickly might not be the right thing to do, and change for the sake of change without really properly considering the impact isn't good either. So there's got to be a balance between holding on too tightly to the past or the saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Balance that between an eagerness for future progress. And sometimes when there's an eagerness for that future progress, we forget to honor the past and actually conserve what works. Let's get into the fact that when we talk about change, it can bring about some fear for a lot of people. And it's important to overcome that fear so we can embrace change and lead a bold life. When you think about our mindset and perspective, that is really what affects the way people cope with change. So our experiences, our mindset, and our perspective shape our reality. You and I can both be faced with a similar change, yet our way of reacting to that change can be completely opposite. And that depends on how we've been programmed to be in any given situation. So embracing and accepting change really depends on how we and what we think about the change. For example, are you the type that thinks change happens to you? Do you feel sort of like things happen and you didn't have a say in it at all? Or are you the type that thinks change happens for you? So maybe you do feel like you have some power in it. Think about this. In what ways does your perspective impact you? And how do you cope when things are changing for you? I think about traditions and the fact that some people are really protective of their traditions. And it's understandable. Traditions make us feel safe in a lot of cases. And when change happens to or for us that we feel makes us less safe, that's where we start getting into really the fear part of the reaction to change. I truly believe that in order to overcome fear and embrace change, we need to understand fear a little bit more in depth. So generally speaking, fear is an emotion induced by perceived threat. This is according to the dictionary, causing physiological changes that may lead to flight, fight, or freeze response. It is a basic survival mechanism occurring in response to a specific stimulus. You might have heard about the flight, fight, or freeze response. I would also add there is a fawn response. This is probably another podcast on its own, but it's important to understand those responses. There's also biological roots when it comes to fear. So speaking of survival mechanism, it actually, when we experience fear, it triggers a release of hormones. So you get that rush of adrenaline, and it's preparing you to react to danger. So it's associated with activation of the part of your brain called the amygdala and the autonomic nervous system. An example of this would be when you are getting ready to do a speech in front of somebody or confront somebody because you have a situation that you need to talk about with them because something bothered you, for example. Our bodies start acting as if we are in imminent danger. So our heart will start pounding, we might sweat, our throats might tighten up. If you've experienced this, you know exactly what I mean, and you can probably feel it as I'm talking about it. So that is really the biological root of fear. There's also cultural and societal influences that cause fear or make us feel like it's something we're supposed to fear. So when you think about social norms, the media, collective experiences, things that we're all going through at the same time, these all affect how we perceive and respond to threats or perceived threats. Fear has a direct impact on our personal growth or even just our ability to experience personal growth. You might have heard about the saying paralysis by analysis, which really is that overthinking and perfectionism, and it can cause us not to take action. Fear definitely can prevent us from taking risks and seizing opportunities. The thing is, we care way too much about what people will say or think. We deep down believe that if someone doesn't approve of something we said or did, it's a threat to our survival. I was actually listening to a podcast earlier today. Jessica Zweig has the Spiritual Hustler podcast, if you've heard of it. If not, go check it out. It's pretty good. But she was talking about the sisterhood wound, and this is the collective fear among women where back in the day when women were accused of being witches and they were burned at the stake, that fear still lives in our DNA, and we subconsciously make choices based on that. I could talk forever about that whole topic, but maybe that's something I will bring about in another podcast. Another impact of fear on our personal growth is self-doubt and limiting beliefs. So the role of fear when it comes to fostering negative self-talk. If you've ever experienced harsh criticism, especially during your developmental years, you probably have some deep programming around this and a lot of stuff in your backpack. And this has created some deep self-doubt and limiting beliefs about your own abilities. And those self-doubts and those limiting beliefs are untrue. They're lies. The voice in your head that tells you you're not good enough or that you shouldn't try something new because you'll probably fail, it's probably not even your voice. But we'll talk later about what you can do to reverse that. Fear also impacts your emotional and physical health. Chronic fear has so many adverse effects on our mental and physical well-being. If we're constantly living in a state of fear, even low-level states of fear, which can tend to happen without us really noticing it, our bodies are really taking a toll, and so are our minds. So the fear hormones, like we talked about earlier, we said adrenaline, there's also cortisol that comes into play with the fight, flight, freeze, fawn, are most likely too high in your system, which really wears down your health all around. So let's talk about some strategies for overcoming fear. Acknowledging and accepting that fear is there. That's super important. The first one, recognize fear. This is the first step in overcoming fear. And I would recommend practicing the pause. We all need to slow the F down and really take inventory of how we maneuver around in our lives. Stop being on autopilot. It's impacting your relationships and your productivity in a negative way. Practice the pause. Really recognize when you're feeling fear. What you can do about that is call it out. Accept it. Accept that fear is a natural emotion. It does not have to control your actions. I like to say name it to tame it. So my personal fear has a name. It's called the Jabberwocky. I actually haven't referred to the Jabberwocky in a long time because, like I mentioned earlier, I've done a lot of work to get rid of the stuff that's in my backpack. But it still has a name and it still pops up here and there. And I talk to it. I recommend that. Name it and talk to it. If you want to feel less fear and less stress, you gotta create some space between yourself and that fear and stress. Make it an entity that is not attached to you. Trust me, it helps tremendously. Finally, accept that you're going to feel fear and stress sometimes. It's going to happen. Use these strategies of recognizing it and accepting it to help you through those times. You just have to accept that it's going to happen and have a good coping strategy around it. Another way to overcome fear is self-awareness and reflection. So identifying your triggers. Understand truly what specific situations or thoughts trigger your fear. There's going to be patterns. Look for them. Do you get triggered by a certain person or group of people? You need to try to notice that. Also notice what stories are you telling yourself about your interactions with that person or group of people. We tend to tell ourselves stories. We tend to make things mean something that it might not actually mean. An example I will share is when I'm noticing my patterns. Mine has typically in the past been authority figures. So if somebody was higher ranking than me, it was an immediate trigger. Like I put on this mask where I didn't even know who I was anymore because of my perception of them being more in control, higher ranking. And a lot of that has toned down over the years as I've worked on myself. But that is definitely something that's a pattern for me. And if it's a pattern for you, I feel you on that and I can help. Just let me know if you have any questions on that. Another thing you can do is reflect on past successes. So think about times when you faced your fears and you had success. Think about a time you were afraid to do something, but after it was done, you realize, okay, it really wasn't that bad overall. I would count that as a win. Maybe it was a difficult conversation. Maybe it was a conflict that you confronted and it turned out to be successful. Maybe it was a presentation you had to give. You ended up getting really good feedback on it. Maybe it was a test you had to take that you were worried about and you actually passed it. Reflecting on those successes is going to help you increase your confidence and it's going to help you reduce your fear over time. So increase your confidence, reduce your fear by reflecting on those successes. Another one I want to talk about is positive imagery. So visualizing your success and imagining the best possible outcomes. This is definitely my favorite strategy when it comes to overcoming fear and embracing change. And this is absolutely worth the few minutes it takes to imagine yourself in your scenario. So let's use public speaking as an example. What you'll do is truly see yourself in front of the group. Imagine the people around the table or in the auditorium or on their team's meeting. Really picture that situation and conjure up within yourself feelings of confidence. Imagine yourself getting great feedback afterwards. You're definitely going to experience the best possible outcome if you're visualizing success than if you were expecting all hell to break loose. you are actually giving your mind the permission to make things happen in a positive way versus expecting something negative to happen. And your mind, your subconscious, is going to follow suit. You're going to want to practice this daily. This is going to help you build that confidence. If you're not a visual person, you can also set intentions about how you want it to go. So, for example, before a meeting or a conversation, focus on how you want to feel after that meeting is done. You don't have to picture anything, but what kind of feeling do you want to walk away with? Name the feelings and claim the feelings. If you focus on feeling confident and positive after the meeting, your subconscious, again, is going to take over and make that happen for you. With enough practice, this will just automatically start happening. You'll start thinking about the best possible outcome after that situation. Your mind will start going in that direction, and you will manifest a better outcome. Another strategy is reframing negative thoughts. We tend, as human beings, to be naturally biased to the negative, and it's a survival mechanism, and it does not serve us well at all in most cases. So reframe those negative thoughts. Look at cognitive restructuring. So this is challenging and reframing the negative thoughts into positive ones. I tend to challenge myself and the people around me to say 2 positive things out loud if we have a negative comment or a thought. This literally reprograms your brain to see the positive more often and will absolutely impact the quality of your life. It's reframing, reprogramming, restructuring, and you're going to see results pretty quickly on that one. The next one is affirmations. Use positive affirmations to boost your self-esteem, and it'll reduce your fear as an output of that. So I subscribe to an email that sends out monthly calendar with an affirmation for each day. And that day's affirmation becomes my guidepost for the day. So remember, we're working on becoming bold, and that requires a boatload, huge boatload of reprogramming. It's not going to happen overnight. You got to keep getting after it. So we talked about ways to overcome fear. Now let's talk about embracing change. Change is inevitable. It's going to happen. We are all experiencing change currently together if you're in the US. And you have to understand that change is going to always happen, so it's up to us how we navigate it. Whether you like change or you don't like change, you experience change. So we're going to talk a lot about shifting your mindset. A mindset that is a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset is going to help you view change as an opportunity rather than a threat. If you constantly view change as bad, you're always going to see bad. Or as I like to say, if you're always looking for shit, all you're going to see is shit. If things never changed, we would never have new medical treatments, new medical technologies. There wouldn't be any kind of workplace improvements. You wouldn't learn anything new. The list goes on and on. Positive change can manifest in so many areas of life that turns into a transformative impact on people, on communities, and organizations. You wouldn't be listening to this podcast if you weren't interested in making some kind of improvement, and all improvement requires change. So it's absolutely a mindset shift. When change happens, it can feel like things are spiraling out of control sometimes. You have to know that even if a change happens and it makes you uneasy or you don't agree with it, you still have control over yourself and what you do. If you're currently experiencing a change that's causing you worry or stress, remember you are absolutely not alone. You need to find something that makes you feel better despite the change. I'm not talking about numbing out. I'm not talking about resorting to substances and just staying intoxicated while you go through the change because you're not actually going through the change if you're numbing out. I'm talking about taking positive action towards making it better. Sometimes things get worse before they get better. Yeah, it's painful. Yeah, sometimes it has to get really bad before people actually decide to take action. Change and fear can really be a good catalyst for birthing something better or undoing something that was getting to be too comfortable. Change can help us evolve and become better humans, even if it doesn't feel like that right now. If you are personally struggling right now with change and or fear, I highly encourage you to talk to someone, reach out for help. There's so many people out there who are experiencing similar things as you. You might feel like you're alone in this, but you're really not. No matter what the situation is, you're not the only one that has ever felt this way. So please take care of yourself. Take your time with talking it out with a trusted friend or a trusted advisor. To recap, change in itself isn't scary, or it doesn't have to be. It's really how we feel about it that creates fear. Our mindsets create our reality and impact the way we react to change. You don't have to do everything right now, but I would encourage you to take one small step, just one first small step in the right direction towards overcoming your fear and embracing change. So your action item this week, anytime you feel that emotional charge or trigger, practice the pause. Take a few intentional mental notes about it. Who or what triggered you? What kind of reaction did you have? What did you make it mean, or what story are you telling yourself about it? Write it down if you can and refer back to that. After you've had a few triggers that you've written down, you'll be able to look back and notice patterns, and that gives you something to work with. Neil Donald Welch once said, "Life begins at the end of your comfort zone." Think about that. How often are you pushed to the edge of your comfort zone? What do you do when you're at that edge? Find your edge. Feel into that edge and push a little further if you can. If you are rarely pushed to the edge of your comfort zone, I would encourage you to look for something that pushes you closer to that edge of your comfort zone. Unless you're completely happy and content with where you are, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that either. But if you are the kind of person you're looking to level up in some way, and you know that you're holding yourself back because you are in fear of embracing change, I would just highly encourage you to push a little further if you can. Personally, pretty much everything in my life right now is new, and all of it has pushed me to my edge of my comfort zone, and I'm thriving because I choose to be intentional with my mindset. It'll never be perfect. I definitely have moments where I'm wondering, what in the heck am I doing? But it'll never be perfect. Perfect doesn't exist. As I always like to say, feel the fear and do it anyway. Overcoming fear and embracing change is how you embrace your inner boldness. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next time. Thanks so much for joining me on this episode of Embrace Your Inner Boldness. I hope you found inspiration and actionable tips to help you live more confidently. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe so you never miss out on the latest insights and empowering stories. Please take a moment to also leave a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps us reach more listeners and continue bringing you more content that uplifts and motivates. Empowering yourself and or your team starts with embracing your inner boldness. When we stop playing small, we open the door to limitless potential. Remember, the only limit to your greatness is the one you set for yourself. Stay bold, stay fearless, and let's make this journey unforgettable.